Hello one and all, and welcome back to the RimWorld Steampunk Samurai series. My friends, I am ever so glad to see you back here today, because we have some very big plans, and I know I say that quite often, but today I truly mean big plans. But before we kick off our plans for world domination, yes, you heard me correctly, we need to do some smaller repairs to some of our buildings. Because I also have some construction plans in mind, and we need to try to refurbish our stone cutting depot here, which we would indeed end up doing and organizing our slate blocks quite nicely. A bulk goods trader from the Blue Clan had ended up arriving, and we ended up doing some trading with him, mostly trading off much of the leathers that we had acquired as well as a little bit of armor. I wish they would have been willing to have bought our slate blocks, as we would have made a fortune, but that's okay. Every little drop into the bucket counts and will help us on our journey. Speaking of which, it's time that we finally begin to kick things off. We're going to be utilizing the militaries of our villages to go out and begin attacking the impid villages nearby. Since we actually have more villages under our clan and thus our empire, we actually have many more soldiers, and thus our chances of taking over the impid villages and capturing them are much higher than before. Thus, we ended up taking 6 new ones. For each village that we take, we'd end up building some type of quarry, a logging camp, a hunting site, whatever corresponded to that town best. I'm not going to dwell on it for too long, as I feel that this is quite boring, but just know that I'm doing this for each one. As our new villages under our empire are building their appropriate work sites and what have you, I thought it might be best for us to begin making some upgrades to our main village, our capital city of Flowing Hills. I began doubling up on some slate walls in the northern section above the current walls that we actually have, and I would also go through and begin digging out a very large tunnel just south of these new walls. That way any raiders that we have coming into this area won't bother trying to come through our walls, and thus they'll try to go around them. Unless, of course, those raiders happen to be sappers and are prepared to dig through our walls, at which point we're going to have a battle right in the heart of our city, but that's something we'll deal with if it happens. With all of our new villages, I would also be going through and setting up their designated militaries with their squads, just some basically equipped troops, if you will. I also wanted to mention that, as it is something that we'll be focusing on later as well. And it's also quite important because these squads of soldiers are the same samurai that are going to be going out and attacking more and more impid villages. Once again, this time around, we ended up capturing 6 more of these small settlements from the Impids. Now, a few of these times that I'm doing this, it's also failing because the Impids are actually fighting off some of our advances into their villages, which is pretty important as well. But while our soldiers and armies are preparing themselves for yet another invasion, I'm sure, we actually received word from a local blacksmith in our kingdom. The smith actually claims to be struck with a great inspiration for a weapon that he'd like to make for us, and says that he is quite skilled, but he needs some funding. Since we have quite a bit in taxes, I decided to give him 2,000 silver. Here's hoping he doesn't let us down. We would once again begin focusing on doing some mining and some construction in the northern part of Flowing Hills here, though, and I do apologize for all the back and forth between the world map and the actual village here. The reason I have to do that is because our militaries have a cooldown timer, and thus I can't just send them all at once. I have to give it time in between, and that's why we're going back and forth so much. But as you can see, we're actually working on a grand palace in this section of the village. Sticking with our current themes and construction materials, we are once again building this structure out of fine wooden walls, only the best for Kona Yoshimaru and all of our people, of course. However, it does seem that construction will need to be halted for a brief moment, as we have the largest impid raid yet. Now, what are they doing here? If I had to hamper a guess, I would say that this is because we've been taking over their entire nation and forcing them into labor camps in their own villages. Ugh, whatever. Luckily for us, all of this aggressive expansion that we've been doing has left us with a very large military, but the problem is our squads for each military is still quite small, meaning we only have 1 samurai per city in most cases. So in other words, though they are trying their best, they're more of a distraction and cannon fodder. For now, that is. Lucky for them, though, we weren't exactly relying on their help all that much, and we would immediately begin bringing out our large steam tanks to do a little bit of rolling and murdering? I've said it once and I'll say it again, boiling hot steam still puts out fire. Quite a shame for the Impids, as it is their primary natural weapon. And regardless of what the conspiracy theorist would have you believe, Impid flames cannot melt steel plates, if you know what I'm saying. But as our tanks were taking on the brunt of the attacking force, our samurai within the city would have to begin clearing out some of the stragglers that made their way in. The last thing that we need is for them to cough and burn the entire damn place down on us. Many of them had destroyed our garage doors and were attempting to take cover in there, but we had stopped them in their tracks. Our samurai would begin using our own garage for this exact same purpose, and as we did that, our tanks finished off a few remaining impids, causing them to flee the area. In case you were quite curious what it looked like when our armies ended up attacking these impid villages, it's about the exact same thing that you just saw, but we are the attacking force. Thanks to the icy, frosty snows of winter, we wouldn't end up having a gigantic forest fire. We kind of already did, but the snow ended up putting it out, at least, I should say. A few days after the battle had concluded, we had a delivery from the blacksmith that we sent our 2,000 silver to, and he made us an excellent brass sword. I think he may have pocketed most of that money. Nevertheless, I suppose we have to use it now. We would utilize this time to go about trying to clean up many of the bodies and the weapons and everything that we had from the raid, as well as doing some deconstruction projects for some resources, but also to make some room and what have you for our new palace and the new section of the village that we've been working on. It was also during this time that Kono Yoshimaru would also request the aid of many other villages in trying to take over some more of these impid settlements. Now, we only ended up taking over 3 because most of our reinforcements came from all of our villages, and thus we didn't really have any military to utilize at the time. Even with the small additions added on though, with the rest that we have been capturing by this point, we are over 20,000 silver in taxes, which is absolutely amazing. I wanted to take some time to expend this money and put it back into our militaries. That way, since we are becoming a very militaristic empire, essentially, it's only going to help us in the long run, and I ended up coming up with this loadout for our troops. Finally, some proper samurai attire and armor, along with a clockwork weapon, the same type that we actually use in our clockwork turrets. Now, I do want to try to get these soldiers some steamwork exoskeletons or clockwork exoskeletons, but they are quite expensive. Back in the village, we're working on the palace once more, putting in the wooden flooring, and it would be pretty barren for now and very open on the inside, but we were also working on the pathing and trying to beautify that, as well as building a large sculpture. This new artwork is going to be in the pathway leading up to the palace itself, and is actually dedicated to Laz, our first leader, because without him, none of this would have been possible at all. Now, the first person I saw comment about this idea to build a statue or a sculpture for Laz was our friend Yuya Plays 9311. In particular, it was mentioned that we should build a statue of Laz, which I thought was a really great idea, and is actually better than the artwork that we ended up making, but unfortunately the mod to do so is outdated, and when I end up trying to use it, it seems to cause issues with reinstalling things around the map, so I can't really use that, and this will have to suffice. We would then actually begin working on some of the skeleton of the palace itself on the inside, with us starting off with a bedroom for Kono Yoshimaru. In terms of its beauty, it's most definitely the best bedroom that we've built in the entire village, though it could use some improvements, I'll say for sure, like some taxidermy. You cut off a lynx head and throw it up on the wall and this baby's all set. As of right now, it's only somewhat impressive, though like I mentioned, very beautiful. We need to try to upgrade the wealth and everything of it as well, as we want this palace to be the talk of the planet at some point. We also ended up finally beginning to brew some sake. I think I mentioned last episode that the temperatures weren't correct and we'd actually have to wait for winter, but for some reason the game was giving me the temperatures in Celsius and had negatives with them, and I thought it was Fahrenheit, yada yada. Anyways, we are now brewing it properly. Once again though, we would end up taking over more and more of these enemy villages. This time around, not only Impid, but also from our Red Clan members as well, with most of them being the Impid villages. But I know what you're probably asking yourself, Rat Knight, you're taking over all these villages, but what are you doing with the Impids, the people that are living there? Well... Okay, before you start calling us bad and accurate names, you should know that these labor camps are only if they're not willing to join our samurai armies as conscripts, so, fair? Now, you probably could have guessed this, but taking in these conscripts of people that we've just raided their homes, their villages, and taking them as part of our empire and killed many of their friends and family ends up making the entire loyalty of our empire a little bit lower, just a tiny bit. Who would have guessed? We can fix this by building brothels and things of that sort, but if things get a little bit too hairy, we may be able to hire some pirates to squash any rebellions that we have, or also to help us in any more conquest endeavors. But for the time being, I think we'll continue just trying to focus on some improvements around the village in between our conquest of the entire planet, of course. As for the moment, I'm going to be building some automated garage doors. Now, these are technically electrical and function off electrical components, but if you use your imagination, we could say they're pneumatic. But for the cream de la crop, we are also going to be building two brand new Emperor's Wrath tanks. These will be replacing the two that we have previously lost in our fleet in the last few episodes. And of course, if you guys have any wonderful names for them, and I'm sure you do, be sure to leave those in the comments section and I'll take a look at them. We also began making some very crucial and necessary upgrades to our palace itself. We would end up adding in something of a throne room with some decorations to go along with it and some proper seating, and on the outside we would actually end up adding two large cherry blossom trees that also function as shrines where people can meditate. The throne that we ended up creating was made of brass, even though it does have a nice golden look to it, of course. Now, I'm not sure that a brass throne really fits with the theme of the Japanese style in the feudal Japan style that we're going with, but it does fit the steampunk samurai style, I think, pretty nicely. And of course, it is quite vital as we're going to be dishing out our orders for this gigantic war against the Impids in the Red Clan and the mercenaries from this area. Speaking of which, we have more places to conquer. This was quickly amounting to a global conquest that, quite frankly, I had never accomplished before with any other prior series to this one. But we're not even close to being through. In the meantime, as we are awaiting our militaries to cool down, regroup, and be prepared to attack once more, we would have Rets begin working on some clockwork bionics. These bionics were for Oxkull, and we ended up doing an enteric apparatus to replace his destroyed stomach along with a clockwork leg to try and help him move around. Now, the surgeries themselves were actually a cakewalk, but unfortunately he would end up getting brazen rot from the operations, and thus we would have to make him some more chime tonic. Not that that was anything too difficult for us to accomplish, and besides, it's well worth it. It was also due to this operation I had the bright idea to go ahead and create a much larger hospital that was much better in basically every way, but also was just much better equipped than the previous one as well. Since we have a larger population, it only makes sense that we would have more beds in case people get injured. As for the old hospital, I decided to refurbish it into something of a laboratory with our alchemy table. The perfect place to be creating some tonics and essence flasks. And because that building is no longer a hospital, I thought it might be a little bit too noisy for our calligraphy tables, so I decided to put those out front with the walkway near the palace. A place that is much more peaceful and tranquil. And then finally, with our militaries in their proper locations ready to attack, at a moment's notice, we truly began conquering, and I really mean that. Essentially, we began taking over so many Impid and Red Clan settlements, as well as maybe a handful of space mercenary settlements that I didn't even bother attempting to count them. We had so many, dare I say, far too many. As you can see when clicking on them, it doesn't even give us an exact number, and when looking at one side of the planet and trying to choose, it won't actually click on all of our settlements because we are that spread out across the entire globe. Setting up the logging, mining, or hunting camps for all of these is going to be a gigantic pain in the ass, and thus I'm not going to bore you with that at all. I'm just going to do it off screen. Which I know I mentioned earlier in the video, but I just wanted to mention it again because this is really going to suck. As you can see though, for a comparison, when clicking on the Impid tribal settlements, they have not even maybe a fraction of what we have, maybe about a third if I had to guess. We have come an extremely long way, my friends, from being a little rinky-dink village with 2 or 3 samurai in it to an entire global army and just empire. It's insane. But we're not done yet this episode, as I want to send us off with a bang. We're sending out Renga and Rats in one of our tanks, in particular Lazarus Revenge, as I feel that it is the most fitting for the job. I had hoped to send them out to try and finish off one of the last remaining large impid villages in the area so we can have a giant battle and clash, but the impids' forces are so dwindled by this point. Really the only faction like that around is the Red Clan, or the Mercenaries, but I'm gonna go with the Red Clan this time. It will take us a few days to get there though, so in the meantime we're going to continue improving our capital. In particular, we are going to be rebuilding our art station and the building that it was within, as well as our bridges around the small ponds within our village. That way we can maneuver around quite easily once more. We were also replacing and repairing many of our residential buildings that were damaged when the mechanoids had invaded us. We didn't really need them up until this point because of so many people dying. We were also doing some fairly insignificant trading with our Black Clan allies, and I say insignificant because this amount of money really isn't anything to us at this point with the amount of taxes we're getting, but it was still nice. And of course, it improved relations. Speaking of which, we began working on plenty of different types of sculptures and bonsai pot plants and different types of artworks. I think everyone is going to want to be our friends once they see our beautiful throne room in our gorgeous palace. Or maybe not, because they're going to think we're genocidal maniacs, but they better stay on our good side. Genocidal maniacs who just so happen to have a gorgeous palace. There we go, tied it all together, didn't I? Rats and Renga had finally arrived at the Red Clan base that we had sent them out to. It seems to be a large swampy village with many a wooden bridge as well as many a wooden structure. But given the climate here with all the rain, even if we had a deliverance tank, I don't think we'd be able to burn it all down, unfortunately. Nevertheless, I don't really plan on using our current tank that we brought with us all that much anyhow. Now you might be asking, Rat Daddy, how do you plan on taking on an entire Red Clan settlement all by yourself with one singular tank that you don't even plan on using all that much? Well, my friends, long gone are the days where we are required to bring our own troops, as we can now request our armies in the surrounding areas to join us. I know I already showcased this earlier on in the video when we took on the large raid of Impids, but this time around we actually have troops who are much better equipped, and we have much larger armies, meaning we can basically call in endless supplies of troops if need be. With their superior armor and superior weaponry such as their clockwork rifles, our samurai will do much better in this battle than the Red Clan could have ever guessed. Even so, with the first few waves of our allies coming in, the Red Clan did have the advantage of numbers on their side, easily overpowering one samurai with 2 or 3 of their own. And because of that, it would seem that we're going to have to get our hands a bit dirtier than I had hoped with our tank, but that's alright, I don't really mind, I suppose. So as more and more of our reinforcements began to pour upon the battlefield, we began utilizing the tank to try and run over our enemies as well as shoot them with our steam turret, as you well know, as we always do. I will say in locations like this that are a thick forest, the dense vegetation makes it extremely hard to go about killing our enemies, as we can't run over these trees all the time or large chunks that may be lying out in the forest. But eventually, with enough work and enough time, we had managed to kill enough of them that the others were beginning to flee and the base had been completely eradicated. It ain't much, but it's honest work. Now technically we could have captured this base as we have been doing with all the others, but given its close proximity to many more, I don't really see much of a point in it. So unfortunately, this settlement, along with those who were in it and leading it, would end up having to be destroyed. Speaking of their leadership, they had a gentleman here leading them by the name of the Foolish, a very fitting name given the circumstances and the outcome of this battle. Prepare yourself for an honorable death, my friend. You've earned it. Given all the invading that we've done towards the Impids this episode, I find it quite ironic that our Impid samurai Rats would be the one to finish off the remaining Red Clan leader. But truly, it isn't anything against the Impids. We've never had any prejudice or anything against them in this series at least, and it's more of just the fact that they are our enemies and they are a blight to this planet, the clan that is hostile and aggressive with everyone else. But especially with us, we have no sympathy for them, just as we have no sympathy for the Red Clan or the mercenaries, of course. We still have very much work to do though, my friends. I believe that this will be the end of this episode, and I believe the next, or possibly the one after the next, will be our last episode in the series, as we are coming extremely close to our goal of completely dominating this planet and wiping our enemies off of the face of it. Using the Empire mod, it is quite simple and easy to go about conquering an entire planet once you get to this point with enough silver and enough settlements, and thus I think we should be able to take it over next episode. But if not, we'll have another two. Either way, I love you ever so much, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.